The massive crystal towers of Valoria Prime stretched toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Each tower pulsed with soft blue light that had guided ships across the galaxy for 3,000 years. But today the light flickered strangely. As if the very heart of the Empire was sick, King Thalon stood on his throne platform high above the capital city. His golden skin caught the morning light while his 6 arms moved in patterns of worry. Below him the city sprawled in perfect circles, each ring showing the order that had kept peace across 12 star systems. Yet something was terribly wrong. The Dragonkin were sleeping. In the depths of the palace, hundreds of stasis chambers hummed with power. Inside each chamber lay a warrior unlike any other in the galaxy. The Dragonkin stood 8 feet tall with skin like polished scales that could turn away laser fire. Their muscles could crush steel, and their minds held the tactical knowledge of 1,000 battles. They were the perfect soldiers created by ancient science to protect the Valorian Empire, but for 6 months, they had not opened their eyes. Dr. Keth approached the throne with careful steps. His 4 eyes showed the exhaustion of sleepless nights spent searching for answers. In his hands he carried the same report he had given every day for weeks. My king, the Dragonkin, show no change. Their bodies remain healthy, but their minds drift in deep patterns we cannot understand. Every treatment we try fails. Every drug we use has no effect. King Thalon's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Have you found nothing, Dr. Keth? No. Clue about what has caused this curse upon my greatest warriors. We have tested everything, my lord. Poison shows negative. Disease shows negative. Mental attacks from our enemies show negative. The Dragonkin simply entered this sleep state naturally 6 months ago. All 400 of them at exactly the same time. The king turned toward the great windows that showed the space around his world. Ships moved between the planets carrying goods and messages. Trade continued and life went on, but everyone knew the truth. Without the Dragonkin, the Empire was weak. Their enemies were already testing the borders. Small raids that would never have happened when the Dragon Warriors stood ready. And what of the new humans who have requested an audience? What do they want from us? Dr. Keth checked his datapad. They call themselves diplomats, my king. Their ship arrived 3 days ago from a system we have never contacted before. They say they come seeking trade agreements and friendship. Their leader is called Ambassador Jiho. King Thalon had heard reports about humans. They were a young race that had only recently learned to travel between stars. Most of the galaxy considered them curious but unimportant. They had no great weapons, no ancient wisdom, and no special powers. What could such a race offer to the mighty Valorian Empire? Bring them to me. Perhaps their outsider eyes might see something we have missed. In the docking bay of the royal spaceport, 3 humans stood beside their small silver ship. Ambassador Jiho was a man of average height with dark hair and calm eyes that missed nothing. Beside him stood Dr. Minji, a woman whose gentle manner hid a sharp scientific mind. Captain Deho completed their group, a former soldier whose steady presence made others feel safe. They had traveled far to reach this place, drawn by stories of the great Valorian Empire and its legendary Dragonkin warriors. What they found was a civilization in quiet panic. The throne room amazed them with its size and beauty. Floating platforms carried visitors up to different levels, while holographic displays showed star maps and battle formations. At the center, King Thalon waited on his crystal throne that seemed to be carved from a single massive gem. Welcome, humans, to Valoria Prime. I am King Thalon, ruler of the Valorian Empire. You have come at a dark time for my people. Ambassador Jiho stepped forward and gave a respectful bow. Your Majesty, we are honored by your welcome. We come from Earth seeking to learn from the great civilizations of this region. We hope to build friendship between our peoples. The king studied them with ancient eyes. These humans looked so small and fragile compared to his own people. Yet something in their manner suggested depths he had not expected. Tell me, humans, what do you know? Of the Dragonkin? Dr. Minji answered carefully. We have heard stories, Your Majesty. Warriors of great strength and skill who have protected your empire for thousands of years. Living legends who have never known defeat. They sleep, all of them, for 6 months. They have lain in chambers below this palace, lost in dreams we cannot penetrate. My greatest scientists have found no cause and no cure. Without them, we are vulnerable to our enemies. The three humans exchanged glances filled with meaning. Captain Deho spoke for the first time. Your Majesty, might we be permitted to examine? Your warriors. Sometimes fresh eyes can spot things that familiarity misses. King Thalon felt a spark of something he had not felt in months. Hope. It seemed foolish to trust these unknown aliens with his most precious defenders. Yet his own people had failed completely. What harm could there be in letting the humans try? Very well. Dr. Keth will show you to the stasis chambers. But know this, humans, if you cause any harm to my dragonkin, you will not leave this world alive. The descent into the palace depths felt like traveling into the heart of a mountain. Level after level passed by until they reached chambers carved from living rock. Here the air hummed with power and the walls glowed with the same blue light. As the towers above, the stasis chambers stood in perfect rows like crystal coffins filled with soft mist. Through the transparent walls, the humans saw their first dragonkin warriors. Even in sleep, they looked magnificent. Tall, powerful forms, with skin that showed hints of scales beneath the surface. Their faces held nobility even in unconsciousness. Dr. Mingji approached the nearest chamber with scientific curiosity. Her medical scanner showed readings she had never seen before. The dragonkin was healthy in every way, yet something was clearly happening inside his mind. Deep patterns of brain activity that seemed almost like evolution in progress. This is not sickness, this is change. They are transforming into something new, but something is blocking the process. They are trapped between what they were and what they are becoming. Ambassador Jiho studied the peaceful face of the sleeping warrior. Somehow he felt certain that the future of both their species might depend on understanding this mystery. The sleeping giants held secrets that could change everything. Dr. Minji worked through the night in the research chamber King Thalon had provided. The room buzzed with Valorian technology she barely understood, but her human medical equipment gave her readings that made her heart race with excitement. Every scan of the sleeping dragonkin confirmed her theory. They are evolving, but they need something to complete the process. Something their own species cannot provide. Ambassador Jiho studied the brain patterns on her screen. The waves looked almost musical with complex rhythms that repeated in beautiful patterns. Yet there were gaps, empty spaces where something should connect but could not reach. What kind of something? Dr. Minji pointed to the neural activity maps. Look at these sections. The dragonkin brain is trying to form new pathways, but it needs a specific type of resonance to bridge the gaps. Their minds are too structured, too ordered. They need chaos, creativity, unpredictability. Captain Deho leaned closer to examine. The data, his military training, had taught him to spot patterns others missed. You think human minds could provide that resonance? Not just any human minds. Our brains work differently than any other species we have met. We adapt, we improvise, we create solutions that should not work but somehow do. That might be exactly what the dragonkin need to complete their transformation. Dr. Keth entered the chamber carrying the morning reports. The Valorian scientist had spent the night running his own tests but found nothing new. When he saw the humans gathered around their equipment, his 4 eyes showed curiosity mixed with doubt. Have you discovered something we missed? Dr. Minji shared her findings with careful words. She knew the Valorians were proud people who would not easily accept that aliens might solve their greatest mystery. But the evidence was clear in every reading. The dragonkin are not sick. They are becoming something more than they were before. But the process needs a catalyst, something to complete the neural pathways that are trying to form. We believe human brain patterns might provide that catalyst. Dr. Keth studied the data with growing amazement. The human readings showed types of neural activity his people had never seen. Where Valorian minds worked in orderly patterns, human minds jumped and danced and created connections that seemed random but somehow worked perfectly. This is remarkable. Your species thinks in ways we cannot understand, but how would this help our warriors? Captain Deho stepped forward with the steady calm that made him a natural leader. Direct neural linking. If a human consciousness could connect with a dragonkin mind during the transformation process, it might provide the missing element they need to complete the evolution. The room fell silent as the full meaning of his words sank in. Neural linking was dangerous even between members of the same species. Between completely different types of minds, the risks were unknown, but certainly extreme. Dr. Keth spoke first. The process could destroy both minds involved. We have never attempted linking between different species. There are no safety protocols. No way to predict what might happen. Dr. Minji nodded grimly. The human volunteer would experience thousands of years of dragonkin memories and instincts. The mental strain could cause permanent damage or death. And if it works? Ambassador Jiho asked the question they were all thinking. If it works, the dragonkin warrior would wake up transformed. Stronger than before, but also changed in ways we cannot predict. They might think differently, feel differently, become someone new while keeping who they were. Captain Deho looked at the sleeping warrior in the nearest chamber. Through the crystal walls he could see the peaceful face of what the Valorians called their greatest champion. Someone named Kale, who had won 100 battles and saved countless lives. I volunteer. The words rang through the chamber with quiet authority. Dr. Minji started to protest, but Deho held up his hand. We came here to build friendship between our peoples. If this fails, we lose one human. If we do nothing, the dragon kin may never wake up and the Valorian Empire falls to its enemies. The choice is clear. Within hours, King Thalon arrived to oversee the preparations personally. The linking chamber had been prepared with both human and Valorian technology working together in ways neither species had imagined before. Cables and sensors created a web around two beds, one holding the sleeping form of Kale, the other waiting for Captain Deho. Human warrior, are you certain of this choice? My champion Kale has the memories of 3,000 years of battle. His mind holds knowledge of warfare that could overwhelm you completely. Captain Deho smiled as he lay down on the linking bed. Your Majesty, every soldier faces death in battle. Today I face it in service of peace. If Kale is half the warrior, you claim he will not let my sacrifice be wasted. Dr. Minji made final adjustments to the human monitoring equipment while Dr. Keth prepared the Valorian systems. Both scientists knew they were attempting something that had never been done before. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential reward. Beginning neural link in 10 seconds. Both subjects show stable readings. The connection formed slowly at first, just a whisper of contact between two very different minds. Captain Deho felt the first touch of something vast and ancient. Memories that stretched back centuries began to flow through his consciousness. Like a river of experiences he had never lived, battle after battle passed through his awareness. The weight of responsibility for protecting an entire empire pressed down on his thoughts. The discipline and order that had shaped Kale for millennia tried to organize Deho's chaotic human mind into neat categories, but something else was happening too. Kale was experiencing human memories in return, the creativity that let humans solve impossible problems, the emotions that drove them to sacrifice for strangers, the adaptability that made them survive against all odds. For 3 hours the two minds shared everything they were. Captain Deho lived through the loneliness of being a perfect weapon who could never show weakness. Kale discovered what it meant to choose your own path instead of following ancient programming. Then something clicked into place like a puzzle, peace finding its perfect position. The dragonkin warrior opened his eyes. Kale sat up in his stasis chamber with movements that were familiar yet somehow different. His expression showed the same nobility it had always held, but now there was something new in his gaze. Depth, curiosity, the spark of someone who could think beyond the patterns that had defined him for so long. Captain Deho. His voice carried warmth that had never been there before. Thank you for showing me what I could become. King Thalon stared in amazement as his greatest champion stood and stretched muscles that hummed with even greater power than before. But more than physical. Strength had been transformed. Kale moved with a fluidity that spoke of new possibilities, new ways of thinking about old problems. The first dragonkin had awakened. But he was no longer quite the same warrior who had fallen asleep 6 months ago. He was something more. 3 weeks had passed since Kale's awakening, and the palace hummed with new energy. Every day brought another successful linking between human volunteers and sleeping dragonkin warriors. But with each success came growing tension in the Valorian court. Gina stood in the engineering workshop beside her dragonkin partner Vera, examining blueprints that would have been impossible just days before. The human engineer's wild creativity combined with the dragonkin's ancient technical knowledge had produced designs that amazed even King Thalen's best scientists. If we channel the plasma flow through these modified conduits, the weapon's power output increases by 40%. Gina pointed to sections of the blueprint with excitement dancing in her eyes. Vera nodded with the measured consideration that marked all dragonkin thoughts. But now her ancient wisdom carried new flexibility, learned from her human partner. The design is elegant, Gina. My people would have spent decades testing each modification separately. Your approach of testing everything together is bold but effective. Around them, other human dragonkin pairs worked on projects that pushed the boundaries of what either species thought possible. The workshop sparkled with innovations that neither race could have achieved alone. In another part of the palace, Hyen met with newly awakened dragonkin warriors in what he called emotional guidance sessions. The human diplomat had discovered that the awakened warriors needed help processing their expanded emotional range. For 3,000 years they had known only duty, honor, and battle. Now they felt curiosity, doubt, and even loneliness. Tell me about your dreams, Roth. Hyen spoke gently to a dragonkin who had awakened just 2 days before. Roth's scaled features showed confusion, as he struggled with concepts that had no place in his previous existence. I dream of places I have never seen, Hyen, gardens with flowers that serve no tactical purpose. Children playing games that teach nothing about warfare. These visions make no sense for a warrior. They make perfect sense for someone discovering that life holds more than battle. Your mind is opening to possibilities your creators never intended. That is not weakness, Roth. That is growth. The dragonkin warrior considered these words with the intense focus his people brought to all important matters. My human partner showed me memories of his childhood. He learned to fight not because he was created for it, but because he chose to protect others. Is it possible that choice makes a warrior stronger than programming? Hyen smiled at the question that proved how much Roth had already changed. What do you think? But not everyone in the palace welcomed these transformations. In the shadow chambers where Valorian nobles gathered to discuss matters of state, Lord Vex spoke words that many others were thinking. The dragonkin are losing their purity. They question orders, they show doubt, they speak of things that have nothing to do with protecting our empire. These humans are weakening our greatest weapons. Lady Neth agreed with passionate conviction. I have seen Kale in the training yards. Yes, he is stronger than before, but he hesitates before striking. He considers his opponent's position instead of simply overwhelming them with superior force. This is not improvement, this is contamination. Lord Corran, the eldest of the noble council, raised his 6 arms in a gesture of deep concern. Worse than that, they form emotional bonds with these alien creatures. Dragonkin were created to serve the Empire, not to develop friendships with outsiders. What happens when they must choose between duty and these new feelings? The nobles were not wrong to worry. The awakened dragonkin were indeed changing in ways that went far beyond increased strength. They asked questions that had never occurred to them before. They sought to understand their enemies rather than simply destroy them. Most disturbing of all, they had begun to care about individual lives instead of focusing only on strategic objectives. These concerns reached King Thalen through whispered reports and formal complaints. The ruler of the Valorian Empire found himself torn between gratitude for his awakening warriors and fear of what they were becoming. His dilemma deepened when long-range sensors detected movement at the edge of Valorian space. Ships unlike any in their databases were approaching from the dark regions beyond the outer rim. The energy signatures matched ancient records that had been locked away for 1,000 years. The Devourers were returning. Dr. Keth brought the news to the king with trembling hands. The Valorian scientist had studied the historical records and knew what their return meant for every living being in the galaxy. My lord, the sensor readings are confirmed. 17 ships of unknown design, but matching the energy patterns from the old war. They will reach our border systems in 6 months. King Thalon felt the weight of 3 millennia of rule pressing down on his shoulders. The Devourers had been defeated once, but at terrible cost. Entire star systems had been consumed before the Dragonkin could stop them. Now they returned at the worst possible time when his warriors were changed and untested. Have the awakened Dragonkin been informed? Yes, my lord. Kale has requested permission to address you about defense preparations. When Kale entered the throne room, King Thalon was struck again by how much his champion had changed. The Dragonkin warrior still moved with deadly grace, and his presence commanded respect. But now his eyes held depths that had not been there before, intelligence that went beyond tactical knowledge. My king, I have studied the historical records of the Devourer War. The old strategies will not work against an enemy that has had 1,000 years to adapt and grow stronger. What do you recommend, my champion? Kale's answer would have been impossible from any Dragonkin before the awakening. We need to do something they will not expect. The Devourers are a hive mind that learns from every encounter. They will anticipate our previous tactics. But they have never faced Dragonkin who think like humans. The words sent a chill through the throne room. Traditional Valorian warfare relied on overwhelming strength applied with perfect discipline. It had kept peace for 3,000 years. But Kale was suggesting they abandon everything that had made them great. Explain what you mean. Humans fight differently than any species in the galaxy. They improvise, they adapt, they create solutions that should not work but somehow do. If we combine Dragonkin strength with human unpredictability, we become something the Devourers have never encountered. King Thalon studied his transformed champion with ancient eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. The choice before him was clear but terrifying. Trust in the old ways that had served for millennia, or embrace change that might save or destroy everything he ruled. How many Dragonkin have been awakened? 112, my lord. Less than a third of our total force. The process takes time and not every linking is successful. The king made his decision with the weight of history behind his words. Continue the awakenings. We will need every advantage we can find. And Kale, yes, my lord. Prepare for a war unlike any we have ever fought. The first Devourer scout ship emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Its hull writhed with organic patterns that pulsed with sickly green light. Sensors showed it was alive, a creature of flesh and metal that had grown rather than been built. When it opened fire, the energy beams adapted in real time to overcome the defending ship's shields. Captain Teeman watched from the bridge of the Valorian destroyer starward as 3 of their best warships were torn apart in minutes. The human military analyst had studied every historical record of the ancient war, but seeing the enemy in action was far worse than any report could convey. All ships retreat to the second defense line. Do not engage the scout vessel directly. His voice carried across the communication channels with calm authority that steadied the panicking Valorian crews on Valoria. Prime King Thalon received the battle reports with growing dread. The Devourer scout had destroyed an entire patrol fleet before withdrawing to the outer system. Worse still, the creature had scanned everything, learning their current weapons and defenses, before disappearing back into deep space. They know our capabilities now, my lord. Admiral, Vix reported with the grim efficiency that marked Valorian military leaders. When the main fleet arrives, they will be prepared for everything we can throw at them. Ambassador Jiho stood beside the holographic display that showed the battle damage. How long until their main force reaches us? Our best estimate is 40 days. The scout ship was much faster than the historical records indicated. They have improved significantly during their thousand-year absence. In the depths of the palace, 200 awakened dragonkin gathered for the first war council that included human advisors. The ancient chamber had witnessed countless strategy sessions over the millennia, but never one quite like this, Kale addressed the assembled warriors with words that would have been impossible before his awakening. Brothers and sisters, we face an enemy that learns from every encounter. Traditional tactics will fail because the Devourers have had centuries to study our old victories. We must become something they cannot predict. Vera raised her hand to speak, and her voice carried the new flexibility that came from human partnership. The engineering teams have completed the first prototype weapons based on hybrid designs. They function in ways no previous Valorian technology has ever worked. She activated a holographic display showing a weapon that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured. Its surface flowed like liquid metal, while energy patterns danced through crystalline cores that pulsed with living light. This weapon does not fire the same way twice. Each shot adapts its frequency, phase, and targeting pattern based on quantum uncertainty, principles the humans call chaos mathematics. No computer system can predict what it will do next because it genuinely does not know until the moment of firing. The Dragonkin warriors studied the design with fascination mixed with unease. Their ancient training valued precision and predictability. This weapon represented everything they had been taught to avoid. Roth spoke the question many were thinking. How can we aim effectively if we do not know what the weapon will do? Captain Deho answered from his position beside Kale. The human had remained on Valoria, primed to help train the awakened warriors in new tactical approaches. You do not aim the weapon, you aim the chaos. Point it at your target and let unpredictability do the rest. Sometimes it will miss completely. Sometimes it will hit with devastating effectiveness. The enemy cannot plan for something that even we cannot predict. For 3 weeks, the combined human and dragonkin forces prepared for war in ways that broke every established rule of military planning. Instead of detailed battle plans, they created flexible response frameworks. Instead of standardized formations, they developed fluid team structures that could adapt to any situation. Sun Ho worked with the dragon Kin Commander Rax to train mixed units where human creativity guided Dragonkin strength in real-time coordination. The results were remarkable but disturbing to traditional Valorian military doctrine. Watch how they move. Sun Ho pointed to a training exercise where human soldiers directed Dragonkin warriors through an obstacle course designed to simulate Devourer ship corridors. No two approaches are the same, even when facing identical challenges. This is not chaos, it is controlled unpredictability. Rax nodded with growing understanding. My warriors are learning to think like your people while keeping their own strengths. The combination creates possibilities neither species could achieve alone. But the real test came when the Devourer main fleet arrived, 43 Bio. Ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their living hulls gleaming with the light of consumed stars. Each vessel was the size of a city and pulsed with the collective intelligence of billions of devoured minds. They had learned from the scouts' data and came prepared for traditional Valorian tactics. What they encountered instead was something no hive mind could have anticipated. The first wave of defenders attacked in patterns that seemed random but followed a deeper logic that combined human intuition with dragonkin tactical knowledge. Ships appeared where no strategic doctrine said they should be. Weapons fired at targets that made no tactical sense until the shots revealed hidden vulnerabilities in Devourer bio-armor. Yeji piloted her fighter in a dance of destruction, alongside her dragonkin partner Zeth, who provided strength and endurance, while she supplied impossible flight patterns that confused the enemy targeting systems. Together they destroyed 3 Devourer fighter organisms that should have been invulnerable to such a small craft. But the enemy adapted quickly. Within hours, the Devourer hive mind had analyzed the new tactics and begun to counter them. Bioships that had been vulnerable to chaos weapons grew new defenses. Targeting systems that had been confused by unpredictable movement patterns learned to anticipate even randomness. The battle raged for 18 hours across 3 star systems. Traditional Valorian forces fought with desperate courage while awakened. Dragonkin units struck with creative fury that kept the enemy off balance. Human advisors coordinated attacks that jumped between targets in ways that violated every principle of concentration of force. When the fighting ended, both sides had paid a terrible price. 7 Devourer bioships lay dead in space, their organic hulls split open like poisoned fruit. But 20 Valorian vessels had been consumed completely, while hundreds more showed damage that would take months to repair. Worse still, 16 awakened dragonkin had died protecting human allies during the retreat from the third battle zone. Their sacrifice created bonds between the species that went deeper than mere military alliance. King Fallon stood in the palace war room studying casualty reports that told a story of courage and loss. The battle had been a tactical draw, but strategically. The Devourers held every advantage. Their main fleet remained largely intact while Valorian forces were bloodied and exhausted. "My lord, we have received a communication from the Devourer fleet," Admiral Lex reported with barely controlled fear. "They demand our surrender within 10 days, or they will begin consuming inhabited worlds." The king looked at the holographic display showing the positions of both fleets. Traditional analysis suggested that continued resistance would only lead to greater destruction. But the awakened dragonkin had shown him that traditional analysis might not be enough. "Contact Kale, tell him we need a miracle." In the depths of space between the fleets, something new was stirring. The Devourer Queen herself had awakened from her 1,000-year slumber, drawn by the strange taste of minds that thought in ways her hive intelligence could not fully digest. For the first time in her species, memory, she had encountered prey that confused rather than merely resisted her. The awakening dragonkin were becoming something she had never devoured before, and that made them dangerous in ways she was only beginning to understand. The Devourer Queen's massive bioship emerged from the center of the enemy fleet like a dark moon made of living flesh. Her presence changed everything. Where before the Devourers had fought with cold efficiency, now they attacked with hungry intelligence that probed every weakness and adapted to every strategy. Dr. Minji worked frantically in her laboratory as reports flooded in from the front lines. The awakened dragonkin were being turned against their human partners by some form of mental manipulation that bypassed their normal defenses. "The Queen is using psychic attacks that target the neural pathways we created during the awakening process," she explained to King Fallon and the assembled War Council. "She is turning our greatest strength into a weakness." Kale stood at the tactical display, but his expression showed strain that had not been there before. Even he could feel the alien thoughts trying to worm their way into his consciousness. The mental discipline of 3,000 years held the intrusion at bay, but for how long? "My lord, we need a way to protect the awakened warriors from mental assault, or we will lose this war before the main battle even begins." Ambassador Jiho studied the brain scans that showed how the Queen's attacks worked. The psychic energy followed the exact pathways that human consciousness had helped create during the awakening process. It was as if their solution had become the enemy's weapon. What if we reverse the process? Instead of permanent changes to dragonkin minds, what if we create temporary links during combat operations? Real-time mental fusion that gives all the benefits but can be broken instantly if attacked. Dr. Minji looked up from her equipment with sudden excitement. Battlefield neural linking. It would require incredible trust and mental discipline from both partners, but it could work. The connection would be too brief for the Queen to trace and manipulate. The first test came 3 days later when Yeji volunteered to link with Zeth during a critical space battle. The human pilot and dragonkin warrior had fought together for weeks and knew each other's combat rhythms perfectly. As their consciousness merged, Yeji felt Zeth's incredible physical strength while he experienced her intuitive grasp of three-dimensional movement. Together they became something greater than the sum of their parts. Their fighter craft moved through the battle zone with impossible grace while weapons fire found targets that should have been beyond reach, but the process extracted a terrible cost. When the link ended, both partners collapsed from neural exhaustion. Yeji suffered temporary memory loss while Zeph experienced emotions so intense he could barely function for hours afterward. The fusion works, but we cannot maintain it for extended periods, Dr. Minji reported after examining both volunteers. Each linking session causes cumulative damage to both nervous systems. Too many connections could result in permanent mental injury or death. Despite the risks, more human dragon-kin pairs volunteered for the battlefield linking program. The tactical advantages were undeniable, but the personal cost grew heavier with each mission. Haiyan found himself counseling warriors who had experienced the deepest possible connection with another, being only to have it torn away when the battle ended. The awakened dragonkin struggled with feelings of loss and incompleteness that their species had never known before. I understand why humans form pair bonds now, Roth confided during one of their sessions. When Timon and I link our minds, become one consciousness, separating afterward feels like losing half of myself? That is exactly what it is, Roth. You are experiencing what humans call love in its purest form. The desire to remain connected to someone who completes you. The Dragonkin warrior considered this with the intense focus his people brought to all important revelations. Is this why humans fight so fiercely to protect each other? Not from duty or programming, but from genuine affection. Yes, and now you understand why the awakened Dragonkin are becoming something your creators never intended. You are learning to care about individuals instead of just serving the Empire. As the war escalated, both sides pushed their capabilities to the breaking point. The Devourers adapted to every new tactic while the combined human Dragonkin forces evolved their strategies with desperate creativity. Gina and Vera's engineering teams produced weapons that grew and changed during combat operations. Ships that could rebuild themselves after taking damage. Armor that learned from each attack and became stronger in response, but the enemy was learning too. Devourer bioships began to mimic the unpredictable tactics they had encountered. Hive mind coordination gave way to individual vessel autonomy. That made their movements harder to predict. The turning point came when the Queen herself entered direct combat for the first time in 1,000 years. Her massive bioship dwarfed everything else in the battle zone, and her psychic presence reached across space to touch every mind in both fleets. Captain Deho felt her alien thoughts pressing against his consciousness like ice water in his veins. Around him, awakened Dragonkin warriors staggered as the Queen's mental attacks found purchase in their expanded minds. She is trying to turn us into extensions of her hive mind, Kale reported through gritted teeth as he fought to maintain his individual identity. The awakening process made us vulnerable to her influence. Then we used that vulnerability as a weapon. Deho activated the emergency neural linking protocol that would connect his mind directly to Kale's during the most dangerous battle of their lives. As their consciousness merged, the Queen's psychic attack struck them both with overwhelming force. But instead of two separate minds, she encountered something she had never faced before. A hybrid intelligence that combined human creativity with dragon-kin discipline in ways that created genuine novelty. For the first time in her existence, the Devourer Queen experienced confusion. The linked minds before her thought in patterns that made no sense to her hive intelligence. They created solutions that should not work. They made choices based on concepts like sacrifice and love that had no place in her consumption-based philosophy. What are you? Her mental voice resonated through both their minds with cosmic force. We are what happens when different species choose to become more together than they ever could apart. Deho and Kale spoke with one voice that carried the weight of two civilizations. Learning to trust each other, the Queen's attack intensified as she tried to understand these strange minds that refused to fit into her categories of predator and prey. But the more she probed, the more confused she became. How could consciousness exist that valued the survival of others over self-preservation? How could intelligence choose cooperation over domination? The psychic assault that should have destroyed them instead created a feedback loop that disrupted the Queen's connection to her own hive mind. For precious seconds, the Devourer fleet lost coordination as their leader struggled to comprehend minds that worked in ways she had never encountered. In that moment of confusion, the combined human-dragon-kin forces struck with everything they had. Chaos weapons fired in perfect synchronization while bio-adaptive armor held firm against return fire. Ships moved in formations that followed no known tactical doctrine, but somehow worked with devastating effectiveness. When the battle ended, the Queen's bioship was damaged but not destroyed. More importantly, her absolute confidence had been shaken for the first time in millennia. She had met minds that her hive intelligence could not digest or understand. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had changed. The Devourer Queen was no longer certain of victory against an enemy that thought in ways that challenged her basic understanding of reality. Back on Valoria Prime, the cost of the battle became clear. 12 more human-dragon kin pairs had paid the ultimate price for their neural linking experiments. But their sacrifice had proven that the enemy was not invincible. King Thalon studied the reports with ancient eyes that had seen too much death and destruction. How many more battles can we fight like this before we have no one left to link with? Ambassador Jiho gave the answer everyone dreaded to hear. 3 more major engagements at most. After that, we will have exhausted our supply of trained pairs. Then we must end this war in 3 battles or face defeat. The king's words carried the weight of an empire that had never known surrender. What do our greatest minds suggest? Dr. Minji spoke quietly, but her words changed everything. There is one option we have not yet considered. Permanent fusion. Between willing volunteers? Not temporary battlefield linking, but complete merger of consciousness between human and dragonkin minds. The silence in the chamber was absolute as the full implications sank in. They were talking about creating something that had never existed before. Beings that were neither human nor dragonkin, but something entirely new. The permanent fusion chamber had been built in the deepest levels of the palace, where the strongest shields could protect the delicate process from outside interference. Dr. Minji and Dr. Keth worked together to create technology that neither species could have developed alone. Captain Daeho and Kale stood before the fusion beds, knowing they would emerge as someone completely different or not at all. Around them gathered the other volunteers who had chosen to risk everything for the chance to become something new. "Are you ready, my friend?" Kale asked with the warmth that had grown between them through countless battles. "As ready as anyone can be to stop existing as themselves." Daeho smiled with the calm courage that had made him a natural leader. "Though I suppose we are not really stopping, we are just becoming more." King Thalon watched the preparations with emotions he had never expected to feel. These beings who had chosen transformation represented hope for his empire, but also the end of everything he had known for 3,000 years. If this fails, we lose our best warriors and our closest human allies. If it succeeds, we create something that may no longer serve the Valorian Empire at all. Ambassador Jiho understood the king's concern, but knew there was no choice left. "Your Majesty, they will serve something greater than any single empire. They will serve life itself." The fusion process began with neural connections so deep they reached into the quantum level of consciousness. Daeho felt his human individuality dissolving as Kale's ancient memories flooded through his awareness. But instead of being overwhelmed, he found his own experiences blending with the dragon kin's knowledge to create something neither had possessed before. Kale discovered what it meant to choose your own path instead of following programming. He experienced the joy of creativity, the pain of loss, and the strength that came from caring about others. Most importantly, he learned that true power came not from domination, but from the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than yourself. When the process completed, the being that emerged from the fusion chamber was neither Daeho nor Kale, but someone entirely new. They retained the memories and knowledge of both original minds while gaining capabilities that transcended either species. "I am ... The fused being spoke with a voice that carried harmonics impossible for any single throat to produce. "I remember being 2, but now I am one who contains multitudes." Around them, other fusion pairs completed their transformations. Gina and Vera became engineer warriors who could reshape matter with their thoughts while maintaining perfect combat. Awareness. Hyen merged with his dragonkin partner to become a diplomat capable of understanding any form of consciousness they encountered, each new hybrid being represented a leap beyond what either species could achieve alone. They possessed dragonkin strength enhanced by human adaptability. They combined ancient wisdom with innovative thinking. Most importantly, they understood concepts that had been impossible for either parent species to grasp fully. But the true test came when the Devourer Queen launched her final assault on Valoria Prime itself. The enemy fleet had grown during the weeks of preparation. Bioships had merged and evolved until some were larger than moons. The Queen's psychic presence reached across space with power that could crush normal minds simply through direct contact. What she encountered instead was something that defied every category her hive intelligence used to understand reality. The hybrid beings met her fleet not with weapons but with pure thought made manifest. They moved through space without ships, their fused consciousness allowing them to exist in multiple states simultaneously. When Devour bioweapons struck them, they simply absorbed the energy and redirected it in ways that followed no known laws of physics. What have you become? The Queen's mental voice carried confusion that bordered on fear, the being that had once been. Deho and Kale answered with perfect calm. We are the next step in evolution. Not human, not dragonkin, but something that transcends the limitations of single-species thinking. Impossible. Consciousness cannot exist without hierarchy, without domination, without the strong consuming the weak. You are wrong. Gunavera spoke while reshaping a Devourer bioship into harmless crystalline art that sparkled with impossible beauty. Consciousness reaches its highest form when different minds choose to become more together than they ever could apart. The Queen's attack intensified as she tried to force the hybrid beings into categories her mind could understand. But every assault only demonstrated how completely they had transcended her philosophy of consumption and domination. Hyen and his dragonkin partner had become something that could communicate directly with the devoured minds trapped within the Queen's consciousness. They spoke to billions of consumed beings and showed them what voluntary cooperation could achieve compared to forced unity. You have eaten so many civilizations, Queen, but you have never truly tasted what they offered. You consumed their bodies and enslaved their minds, but you never experienced their dreams, their hopes, their love for each other. For the first time in her existence, the Devourer Queen felt something she had no name for. The hybrid beings were showing her memories of species she had consumed. But instead of the fear and desperation she remembered, they revealed joy, creativity, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. This is impossible. I remember their final moments. They were weak, afraid, begging for mercy. You remember only what? Your hunger allowed you to see. Look deeper. See what you chose to ignore because it did not fit your need to justify consumption. The Queen's massive bioship shuddered as conflicting thoughts ran through her hive mind for the first time in millions of years. The consumed minds within her consciousness began to assert their individual identities. Instead of simply serving as extensions of her will, she had built her entire existence on the belief that strength meant domination and survival required consumption. But these hybrid beings demonstrated a different kind of strength. They had chosen to merge not from hunger, but from love. They had become more powerful by giving up individual identity, not taking it from others. What you offer is extinction. If I accept your philosophy, I cease to exist as I am. Yes, the hybrid beings spoke in perfect harmony. But you also become something greater than you ever imagined possible. The choice is yours, Queen. Continue as you are and eventually face extinction when the galaxy unites against you. Or choose transformation and discover what you could become. The battle that followed was not fought with weapons but with ideas. The Queen's hive mind wrestled with concepts that challenged every assumption she had made about the nature of existence. The hybrid beings did not attack her directly but simply offered her the choice to become something new. When the Queen finally made her decision, the change rippled across her entire fleet. Bioships that had been weapons of consumption began to transform into something beautiful. The devoured minds within her consciousness remembered who they had been before and chose to remain, connected not as slaves but as willing participants in something greater. The Devourer Queen ceased to exist. In her place arose something that had never been seen before in the galaxy, a collective consciousness that preserved individual identity while sharing knowledge and experience freely. She became the first of a new kind of being that combined the benefits of hive mind coordination with the creativity of independent thought. King Thalon watched the transformation of the enemy fleet with amazement that bordered on disbelief. Ships that had threatened to consume his empire now sparkled with the same crystalline beauty the hybrid beings had shown. The greatest threat his people had ever faced had chosen to become something entirely different. What happens now? He asked the hybrid being that retained memories of serving as his greatest champion. Now we explore what is possible when different forms of consciousness choose cooperation over conquest. The galaxy is vast, King Thalon, and full of species who have never imagined what they could become together. The former Devourer Queen approached Valoria Prime not as a conqueror but as something seeking to understand the transformation she had undergone. Her voice reached every mind on the planet with gentle curiosity instead of dominating force. I have memories of consuming countless worlds, but now I remember what I destroyed in my hunger. Will you help me learn to create instead of devour? Will you teach me what it means to choose cooperation over domination? The age of the Valorian Empire ended that day not through conquest but through evolution. In its place arose something unprecedented in galactic history. The Human Dragon Kin Federation welcomed all species who chose transformation over domination, cooperation over conquest. The hybrid beings became guardians of a new philosophy that spread across the stars. They protected not through military might, but by offering every species they encountered the choice to become more than they had ever imagined possible. Ambassador Jiho's original mission to establish trade agreements had become something far greater. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not as conquerors or merchants but as catalysts for transformation. They showed other species that evolution could be chosen rather than simply endured. The sleeping giants had indeed awakened, but they had become something far more wonderful than the perfect warriors they had been created to be.